We'll get started in a few minutes, just letting everybody get a chance to get in and update their client. We'll get started in about 2 more minutes, just giving everybody a chance to get in and get updated so they can join the meeting. Good evening, everyone. My name is Patrick Botts Forbes. I am the LAFD CERT Community Emergency Response Team Central Bureau Coordinator. And this is our third Wednesday of the month, continuing education training. Tonight's topic is going to be on what the CERT response looks like. For those of you who might have stumbled upon this and don't know what the Community Emergency Response Team is, it's essentially basic training put on by, initially created by the Los Angeles Fire Department, and it teaches you basic disaster preparedness and response. Typically, it's taught for free. Typically, it's done through a fire department, emergency management department. Some are put on by police or sheriffs. There's a lot of community groups that put these on. CERT is even taught at a business level and taught to employees. The CERT training, the basic CERT training, is really based upon training that all firefighters go through. And it teaches you essential skills that are designed to be part of your response toolkit. These skills include disaster awareness, how to look at a building, tell if it's safe to enter, how to search that building, how to identify threats such as chemical spills, um, electrical lines that might be down and causing problems. Disaster first aid. This is different than basic first aid CPR AED, but focuses on quickly bandaging, stopping bleeding, and minimizing injuries, doing like a sling and swath to help a sprained or dislocated elbow or knee, how to splint. Teaches how to do medical triage, which is focused on identifying when you have multiple um, victims or survivors of an incident, how to prioritize them and prioritize which ones need to go to the hospital first. Teaches you about the fire triangle, how to use a fire extinguisher, disaster psychology. There's a lot that goes into what happens when our lives are disrupted and how it can impact responders even that we wouldn't normally recognize as being a problem, and teaches you really to look out for each other, which is critical because for those who have been in a disaster, this is not a few hours. This is not maybe not even a couple of days. This could be weeks or months. And the stress of responding to neighbors who are worse off than you, who have possibly lost loved ones, who have had their homes destroyed. Yes, it's bad for them, but it's the emotional and psychological toll it takes on us as first responders is nothing that it is something that we need to take into account and deal with. Unfortunately, professional first responders have to deal with this, and there is a very high suicide rate for the professionals. So it is something that we as volunteers especially need to pay attention to because we might not have the coping mechanisms that a lot of the professional agencies are now implementing to help their people. Teaches you about the incident command system. Teaches you about how everyone reports to one person and only one person, and span of control, making sure that you don't have too many people reporting to you. The ideal span of control is three to seven. Five is ideal, and not how to overwhelm yourself with too many people who are reporting to you. That I mentioned that search and rescue, how to search a building safely and methodically, but also how to get out of there in case there's, say, an aftershock and you've become disoriented and you've lost where you are in the building. The typical basic CERT training runs 17 to 24 hours, depending on who puts it on and if they do the final exercise at the end. And it gives you a certificate of completion. The original purpose of the Community Emergency Response Team is that when a large disaster occurs it's understood that prof- professional first responders will be overwhelmed. Um, 911 will typically become run busy. All the professional responders within municipalities, such as firefighters, EMS, police, will be dispatched almost immediately, and there won't be available resources to get to everywhere that needs them, that's calling in for 911. And so it really teaches us as community members to be prepared ahead of time for a disaster. There's things we can do to make sure that when there's no power, when our cell phones don't work, when the water might not be safe to drink, when we have a disruption in our lives, how we can mitigate that and not need help to continue for the next few days, if not weeks. Teaches us to be prepared to take care of ourselves, but our families as well during this disaster. And then, if we want to, trains us how to safely help our neighbors after the disaster begins and for the next several days. Teaches us then how to become force multipliers after the professionals come in. There will be resources coming in from the outside, from other parts of the state, from neighboring communities that are not impacted, from neighboring states, even from other countries. And with the basic skills that we learn, we can provide assistance and be effectively skilled or unskilled labor that will support those professional responders to do the skills that they are certified to do and equipped to do, and allow us to take some of the burden that we can actually do off of their shoulders so they can help more people. In terms of levels of community emergency response, and this is about as generic as I can make it because this is going to be very locale dependent. There's essentially non-CERT trained or convergent volunteers, people who want to help but have not graduated from the program yet. That doesn't mean they're useless or shouldn't be allowed to help. It simply means that they may not be aware of all the skills and training and safety things they should be looking out for. You then have a CERT graduate, someone who's graduated from the training. A CERT volunteer or a CERT team member takes the next step and becomes part of the solution versus a CERT graduate who they took the class and that's the extent of it. They don't want to be part of the team. They don't want to necessarily help their neighbors out. But that basic training allows them to at least take care of themselves and their family and hopefully not need help during the disaster. CERT team leaders generally have an additional level of skill. They've taken additional training. Hopefully, they have more experience. Really, what we see is that while we hope everybody will be a leader, you can usually tell the people who will be natural leaders. Some people just step up and they step to the next level. Others can become that, but takes them a little bit longer. I always, when we run classes, try and look for the people who are going to be obvious leaders and willing to step up because, as we'll talk about in the next few slides, the CERT leaders really run everything. And without the team leader, you don't have a team. And it takes a lot of work to get someone sometimes out of their shell, even if they have the skills and additional training, to really take to the next level and become that CERT team leader. A lot of municipalities, LA City, for example, LA County, they have a sworn disaster service worker program. In the case of LA City, it's called the Call Out Team. And these are credentialed members who've been background checked, go through additional training, and have additional responsibilities, but an additional desire to help the fire department help the city help their neighbors do more. And this is kind of separate um, than a standard CERT team and team leader, which helps at the community level. This is going above and beyond that. And oftentimes it is completely separate. Sometimes we see that the people who are members of the community, the call out team, don't want to do the community stuff. They like the shiny badge, the wearing turnouts. They like wearing the vest. They like driving the fire department vehicles and really going out to help the fire department in their day to day. We hope that these people, when the disaster occurs, will step into the role at the community level, but oftentimes we see a deviation here, where they want to do something different. Um, a lot of programs have CERT coordinators. Sometimes these are paid professionals. Sometimes these are volunteers. Um, and it really depends on how your program operates. But that CERT coordinator takes on the additional role of kind of leading, teaching, organizing the CERT teams, and kind of providing additional guidance. Um, CERT instructors, again, can be volunteers or paid professionals. A lot of times these are firefighters, or these are people who have a lot of experience in emergency management, or volunteers at a more advanced level. And there is a whole train the trainer program that teaches you how to teach the CERT material to people who have never taken it before. Program managers likewise have additional understandings of how a CERT program operates and can grow, and how to retain the volunteers. One thing that causes my eye to twitch every time I hear it is recent graduates love to say that they're CERT certified. There's simply no such thing. As I mentioned before, when you take the training, you get a certificate of completion. That means you've completed the class. There's no obligation, no duty to respond. There's no swearing in. There's no um, certifying agency that says, yes, you took all this training, you've tested, and we've confirmed that you have this additional level above and beyond everybody else. And I think that's really a misunderstanding of what the intent of the CERT training is. It is to teach us basic skills to help us be prepared for a disaster, to take care of ourselves and our families, and then to safely help our neighbors. Um, if you're going to do this for a piece of paper, and we see this all the time as people ask for proof that they've done this so they can show their employers, or they're expected to, or they want more and they want some sort of um, piece of paper, quite frankly, that says they are. That is not the intent of this. What is the community emergency response team? And the answer to that is actually very difficult. Every CERT program is different. And likewise, when you have an exercise, you have an incident commander. Every exercise, training drill, every operation, everything run by different incident commanders will be different. And so every municipality, every city, every town, every village, every business that runs CERT will be different, because it's really based upon who's running it and the needs of that municipality, needs of the community, needs of the business, that's going to dictate what CERT is to them. CERT fundamentally needs to be sponsored by or run by a government agency. That is how it was designed to be and how it is run. We've seen CERT programs that are of grassroots origin that get cease and desist letters from their government agencies that run the CERT program, or worse, and I say worse in that this should not happen, but does, where the sponsoring agency has abandoned CERT and is actively striking down the grassroots CERT teams out there. Um, and I don't have any words for that beyond what I just said. Generally speaking, however, there is no CERT organization. We do see a lot of 501c3s that are spun up to support the CERT team. But really depends on your program, how they want to allow that or encourage that or operate within that or with that. Unfortunately, what we also see is it's very common for CERT programs to get reset continually and frequently, depending on who is the CERT program manager. If it is someone who has done it for a long time, or if it is a role, an other duty as assigned to someone who it is their career in their career ladder. And oftentimes we see these program managers come in and out, and every single time there's a reset to that program. And it makes it very difficult to build something and have continuity and growth within that when that happens. What I do recommend and what we see is where there's strong leadership at either the top or the bottom, that's when the program is allowed to grow. And I mentioned that team leader position. It is oftentimes we see someone shows up a few times and they're asked to be a team leader. That is oftentimes not the best way to recruit team leaders, because a team leader kind of needs to have a vision and needs to have experience, needs to have drive, needs to have additional skills. Not everybody will be a good team leader. And when you have a bad team leader, oftentimes that team will dissolve, that program will fall apart underneath that leadership, or rather lack thereof. Really, a CERT team or CERT program fundamentally is a group of volunteers, and its existence relies on maintaining the interest of those members. When you have a CERT class and graduation, getting people to do something immediately after that is probably the best time to get them involved. They get busy doing other things. If there's no opportunities for them to do stuff, if there's nothing to keep their interest, they will find other things to do, and CERT will become secondary or tertiary or irrelevant to them. And so I highly encourage, when you have a class that graduates, give them something immediately to do afterwards, to rope them in and drag them in and start to build their interest and make them feel like they're part of the team, feel like they're part of the program, and hopefully give them interest in becoming a team leader and keep them coming back. What does the CERT basic training teach you to do? Well, we kind of touched on this. The original intent was really that you are the first responder until the professionals arrive. In rural areas around the country, this may be hours or days, depending on how far out you are. I know there's counties out there where there might be only one or two police officers or deputies, or you might have a completely volunteer fire department there that are hours away from your location because they have jobs. And when the call goes out, the 911 call goes out, they have to get off from work. They have to go to the fire station, change into their turnouts, get into the vehicle, and now drive hours to your location. In urban areas, this response may be 5 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. really depends on how busy things are and where resources are. Um, Something like LA City, it's they actively manage where resources are in parts of the city and will identify where there are no ambulances available, where there are no fire engines available, and may actively move up fire companies into other parts of the city to provide that coverage to keep their response time down. But in a disaster, even in a major city, we can expect that response is going to be hours, if not days, even, depending on how high on the priority list you are, depending on the severity of your needs. So we really teach um, do the greatest good for the greatest number in the shortest amount of time, and do not bring a victim to an incident. Those are the two core fundamental rules we have as CERT graduates. Do something, help people, do it quickly, and help as many people as you can. But also, don't get injured, don't do something stupid, don't need help because you wanted to help other people. Unfortunately, we have volunteers who become injured because they got excited, they wanted to do something, they wanted to help, and didn't take personal care. And it's hard to do. This is where the team leader role really comes into play, is because you have eager volunteers who want to help, and they can become very tunnel visioned. They can focus in on what they're doing to the point where they don't have that 360-degree view around them. They're not paying attention to the threats that can injure them. And the team leader's job is to not get sucked in and to make sure that you keep everybody safe. Now, let's get into something that I think we don't talk about enough. We talk about what the CERT basic training teaches you, but we don't often talk about what the basic CERT training doesn't teach. I mentioned that CERT training is based on what every firefighter learns as they go through the academy. And that's true. It gives you a lot of the basic skills that firefighters have. However, it gives you none of the experience. It doesn't teach you how to develop strategies. It doesn't teach you tactics. And these are critical when you're approaching an incident, approaching a situation. You need to develop that thinking of, how are we going to go in? Is it safe to go in? How are we going to go in? How are we going to back out? Those are tactics. What we don't learn is we have multiple incidents. How do we do the greatest good for the greatest number in the shortest amount of time when we have multiple incidents demanding our resources and we have limited resources? It doesn't necessarily teach you where to go during a disaster, when to go during a disaster. What is the trigger that you're going to mobilize as a CERT member? And what are you going to do when you get there? And most critically, it doesn't teach you that you don't know what you don't know. And I think this is something that um, gets us in trouble a lot, is how do we develop skills that we need to do this when we don't know what those skills are? The real problem becomes when a little bit of skill plus little to no experience and a desire to help leads people to be careless, eager. They want to rush in. It really is a recipe for disaster. And quite frankly, the professionals deal with this too. You have rookies, you have people on probation, probies, and they're probably the most dangerous of the professional responders because they don't have the experience yet to not get into trouble. They don't have the experience yet. They haven't developed the strategy and tactics yet to get themselves out of trouble when they get into trouble. Because trouble will find you. And if you can't get yourself out of the trouble, then you're going to drag your teammates into it. And that's where we see problems. And that's really where I wish CERT could do more, but quite frankly, I don't know how it could. Um, and we see this when we have professionals, say professional firefighters who have 20 years of experience come and teach the class to you who have never done first aid before, never thought about disaster preparedness. They teach you the skills and they think, okay, you're ready to go save the world. But they don't realize that they haven't taught you the experience that you need to actually do so safely. Getting down to really what this program, or sorry, this continuing education module is about is, what does a CERT deployment look like? Well, there's two categories. You have a planned event and then you have a disaster or an unplanned event. A planned event's easy. You have someone running it. You have an incident command system chart set up. Who is in charge? Who's doing operations? Who's doing planning? What are the teams? What are the divisions? Who is the support infrastructure? And this is all coordinated and planned and documented. And especially when the professionals do it, there's multiple eyes on the event action plan. When there's a disaster, we fall back to training. We fall back to certain documentation that we might not even have access to. The expectation is, based upon your experience, how are you going to deploy and fall into line when no one is telling you what to do? And that's where the lack of experience becomes very much of a problem, especially when the expectation is, we train these people, we gave them a bunch of skills, and they should be able to do what we expect them to do without understanding that they have none of the experience that we do, and they don't have anything to fall back upon to get themselves out of trouble and to keep themselves out of trouble. So when you're doing a deployment, the question becomes, is this going to be a local deployment or a managed deployment? I say local because all incidents are local. The CERT training teaches us very clearly that we do not self-deploy. If there's a fire on the other side of the city, we don't drive to that and offer our help. We don't freelance. We don't try and find problems to solve. However, if the incident or disaster occurs in our own neighborhood, right in front of us, it is very apparent that something is wrong and maybe we can do something about it. That's a local deployment. That is us being good Samaritans. That is us helping our neighbors. That is the intent of the CERT training from the very beginning. If your program has very strict rules about this and is very organized, they might have a managed deployment instead, where they will call you and say, hey, we need your help. Get your bag, meet at the CERT staging area, meet at the fire station, meet at where we plan for you to go. But how are you going to get that call? Is this going to be on a two-way radio? Is this going to be on your cell phone, email? Is this going to be like Northridge? The call for CERT trained members or CERT trained volunteers to go and offer their help at a fire station went out on broadcast radio and TV. What is the reality of, are these things going to work? We already know that, especially in urban areas and even especially in rural areas, that cell phone communication is going to be spotty at best during a disaster. If everyone's using their cell phone, the cell phone network's not going to be able to handle it. If the power's out, the cell towers only have a few hours of battery backup and then will go down, at which point our cell phones become bricks, paperweights. So if we're relying on communication over cell phones, this might be very problematic. Do you know to turn on your radio and start listening on a pre-assigned channel or a call to deploy? If you don't know that, there very well may not be any plan for that, or you simply aren't looped in. And then who calls for this deployment? Who do you report to? In LA City, generally speaking, it's going to be the fire department. In other smaller municipalities, it might be the police or sheriff, might be the emergency management department. It really depends on the program that you're part of. And every program is going to be different. Where smaller municipalities really have an advantage over larger ones is that in LA City, we're spread out over huge geographic area. If you're in a small town, it might be easier for you to train together with your other CERT trained members and start to build a cohesive team and really start to plan accordingly. In LA City, we're spread out so thinly that even though we run regular drills, even though we have these trainings, even though we have community meetings, oftentimes we see different people each time. And it's very hard to develop a cohesive training program where we really start to train to a level that we need to be able to operate at. Oftentimes, you're going to have people who have had different classes and expect different things and expect things to go one way. And when they go differently, they might become confused or not able to adapt quickly to that. We did a drill in Encino, an exercise in Encino, and I was the incident commander. Teams were pre-organized and sent out, teams 1, 2, 3, and 4. When they got to me, I assigned them different team names. That threw them for a loop. I thought I was on team 1, but now you're telling me I'm on team Echo. And there was confusion there. Well, the incident commander dictates how things are run, and how it's run under one incident commander is going to be different than how it's run under a different incident commander. And so taking every opportunity to practice and train, you're going to see variances on how things are done, and it gives you more flexibility and being able to say, okay, well, we're doing it differently, but it's similar. How is it different and similar? And how can I put these together in my own mind and be able to operate? A smaller municipality may have more cohesive training where you're all working under the same plan and you have that repetition so you can deploy under the same guidelines. Larger municipalities, larger teams, it's going to be more variable and quite frankly different every single time. When you're communicating, how are you communicating? Are you using radios? Who are you talking to? Are you talking to team members? Are you talking up and down? Are you talking to the fire department? Are you talking to the emergency management department? Or are you isolated to your local team? If you are starting at a local team level, how do you coordinate higher up? The intent is not that CERT runs as an island. The intent is that we fold into the larger response. But how does that look like? Are they expecting you to show up as a team? Are they expecting you to show up as random volunteers that they may or may not want to or be capable of dealing with? And so that's something you have to explore in your CERT program, and that needs to be communicated and practiced, because the professionals have a lot of training and a lot of experience. And when someone who's just graduated from a CERT class that doesn't know how the planning P works or has never heard of the planning P, their ability to become part of that larger response is limited. And then we train a lot. If you do that disaster drill at the end, oftentimes you're going to have a single incident you're responding to. And the reality is, during a disaster, there's multiple incidents. How do you have the resource management to deal with those multiple incidents? A lot of times we don't train to that level. And I think it is something that CERT programs need to focus on, because it is dramatically different than dealing with a single fire or single car crash when you have burning buildings, cars flipped over, cars crashed into each other, um, multiple victim incidents, and just a variety of different things. So we talked about really what the CERT deployment looks like or should look like, but how you break it down is really a lot easier than that. And I think we overthink things. Um, you need to find out how bad it is first. Do we even need to deploy? If you can't answer that question, your response to this incident is going to be problematic. Um, how can we make it less bad? That's really the goal here, is to do something. And that could be, if someone's injured, how can we manage their injuries to prevent them from getting worse? I can tell you that during an earthquake, you do not want to go to the hospital. If you need to go to the hospital, then you really need to go to the hospital. But if you can avoid going to the hospital, that's the best thing you can do. And there's certain things, especially if you have some medical training, where you can look at an injury and go, okay, this is bad, but we can stabilize it. We can make it not get worse. That gives the hospitals time to cope for the influx of all the people who need to be there, and keeps our neighbors or our family members from having to go to a even worse situation. However, as I said, if you need to go to the hospital, you really need to go to the hospital. So how can we make sure that when we see these kinds of injuries, that we can get them the appropriate medical treatment? How do we get them to the hospital? Especially if 911 doesn't work. Our cell phones don't work. We have no way for calling for help. And during our drills, we really focus on this. How do you think outside the box? I need to get someone to the hospital. Am I going to go with them? If I'm part of a team, is my entire team going to go with them? Professionals deal with this all the time. If you're, say, an LA County fire, you're a paramedic on an engine, and you have a paramedic call and a basic life support ambulance shows up. Guess what? You're going with the ambulance if you're the paramedic. Guess what happens to the engine? The engine goes along with you, because you're not going separate. You're not going alone. You're part of the engine. And so breaking up a team is not something that is done lightly ever, and should not even, you should, as a CERT team, try and think creatively. But if you're the only one with advanced medical training, maybe you do have to go with them. That takes your entire team out of commission, or at least limits their abilities after you go to the hospital with someone. How can we help our neighbors recover after the initial help that we provide our neighbors? Our training gives us the ability to help them recover faster. And this is where more prepared and more resilient communities bounce back from a disaster faster than ones that we see get decimated. Oftentimes after a disaster, a lot of people move out of the community. But we've seen communities that get hit hard time after time, and people stay. By preparing the community together and being part of the community and really showing that we're all in it together, we can help our neighbors recover faster. That also means that we should prepare them for the next disaster. It also means that we should prepare them for the next disaster before the first disaster. And so, how we can start planning and pre-planning and working with our neighbors to get ready, to make sure they have enough water, to make sure they know, okay, after the earthquake, let's all come out of our homes and go meet at this gathering site and find out how bad things are and where we need to help each other out, where we have um, people who have medical needs. They're on oxygen. They are on CPAP machines. They are wheelchair bound, or they're on the second floor and the elevator's broken and they can't get downstairs. These are the kinds of things that we can really work together as a community, as a neighborhood, and really help each other out. Um, I think I forgot to put this in here. There's a program called Map Your Neighborhood, and it really focuses on that first golden hour right after the earthquake or other disaster, where we can do the greatest good for the greatest number and hopefully mitigate a lot of the risks that become apparent over the next few hours. The most injuries occur during an earthquake, immediately after the earthquake, by the earthquake, or an hour later as people are starting to recover from the earthquake. And so, if we can mitigate that second wave of injuries, we do a lot of good for our neighbors. And that goes back to the core ideas: do the greatest good for the greatest number in the shortest amount of time. Do not bring a victim to an incident. Here's things that we can do to help. If you know cell phones don't work or you can't get a hold of 911, people are going to panic, especially if they've never been in a major earthquake before, or they've never been in a tornado before, or whatever local disasters you have. Being with our green vests and helmets and backpacks visible, we can reassure our neighbors that trained responders are here. We've been trained to help. We've been trained to um, be there before the professionals are. And that, especially if that's going to be hours or days, is going to be a lot of good for the people who have never experienced this before, never thought about this before, and now they're dealing with it. Triage, stabilize, and report to the professional responders. Let them know where they need to go. We can deal with the small stuff. They can deal with the big stuff. They don't have to deal with the small stuff. They probably won't deal with the small stuff. That means that the small stuff gets left behind for us to deal with. And that's where we can provide a greatest good for the greatest number in the shortest amount of time. Be flexible. Semper Gumby. Always flexible, because everything will be different. Nothing will go according to plan, and nothing will be the way you practiced it in a drill. But where we adapt quickly and can provide assistance, that's where we're going to do the greatest good. A CERT disaster response could look like a lot of different things. Will look like a lot of different things. For those who are told to wait for a call from whoever your program manager is, assume that call's not going to happen. Hopefully it does. But what are you going to do if that call never happens? Are you going to sit at home waiting for a call that's never going to come? Your cell phone doesn't work, you're not going to get that call. Your landline, or you don't have a landline and they have no way of getting a hold of you, that call's never going to come. So what are you going to do? Start planning with your neighbors. Pre-plan for the disaster so that you can train to it and everybody knows what to do. Where's the command post? Where's the CERT staging area? Where are we going to set up? Where are we going to meet and set up our response? Where are most of the volunteers going to go? Are they going to go to the CERT staging area that we may or may not have defined? Are they going to go to a fire station, to a sheriff's station, to a police station? Are they going to go to a library? Are they going to go to a public park? These are where resources are. These may be where you're going to find other CERT graduates who want to help, or just spontaneous volunteers that want to help. How are we going to communicate? Relying on your cell phone, not the best idea. Not saying that the cell phone is going to be a brick, but relying on your cell phone may isolate you and may lead to you not being able to be part of the response. So if we pre-plan radio communications, everybody has an FRS radio. Most of you are ham radio operators. This is what channel we're going to be on, what frequency we're going to be on to communicate ahead of time. Practice it. Run a radio net every week, or at least once a month. Make sure you know who you can talk to. What is the area of operations? Are we going to form a team and just wander around, helping whoever we can? Or is these are the blocks that we're going to check on first and make sure that we can render aid to our immediate neighbors, and then not get too far out of our own area so that we can be where we're needed the most? Where are we going to get additional resources? You can only have so much. You can only bring so much with you. You can only do so much. You're going to need more help. Where is that going to help? That help going to come from? Is it going to be a fire station? Is it going to be police? Is it going to be emergency management department? Are there hospitals or clinics or someplace that will have additional medical trained people and supplies that you can get help from? Where are we going to send people to that need more help than we can provide? And a lot of times we forget this in the drills. You're going to need to get the most severely injured to the hospital. But if it's not going to be in an ambulance, how are you going to get them there? Do you have a vehicle? Well, if you do, and you transport someone to the hospital, you could be out for hours before you get back. Or are you going to be creative about it and see if you can find neighbors who are more than willing, or are willing to, at the very least, take someone to the hospital because they don't go, they're going to die. Maybe they're going to bleed over someone, all over someone's car. Unfortunately, people who have head injuries or severely injured will vomit. There needs to be some understanding that there are risks in helping someone out of the goodness of your own heart. Someone getting sick all over your car and bleeding all over does not do great for the value of the car, but you want to help people and are willing to take on that to help someone hopefully save their life by getting them to the hospital. When we talk about CERT roles, we have to be careful that Semper Gumby, that always flexible. A lot of teams like to pre-plan who the incident commander is, who's going to be operations, who's going to be medical. Inevitably, when the disaster occurs, those people might be out of town. So I prefer to think, what roles do we need to fill? Not who is going to fill those roles, but what roles do we need filled and who's available to fill them? And then practice, rotate roles, have people do multiple things. The more flexible you are, you can be a radio operator, a scribe, you have some experience leading a team, you've thought about things, you've taken additional training. When I show up, I ask, what do you need me to do? Not, okay, I'm a coordinator, so I'm going to take control. No, that's not maybe where I'm needed the most. Maybe they need a medical team leader. Maybe you need a radio operator. Hopefully they're not only needing scribes, because I'm not good at writing things down, but I understand my own limits. Where am I needed? What roles are needed? And then the drills typically when we run a drill, only go for a couple of hours. When we try to do bigger exercises and say, okay, you've gone on a damage assessment team. Now you've come back, you've completed your damage assessment. Now we need you to become part of the incident response team. Those transitions have not gone well. People are like, oh, well, I've just walked for 45 minutes. I want to sit down, or I want to drink and go home because I'm done. What is the expectation here? Are we only going to be deployed for an hour or two? Or are we not expecting the fire department to show up and we're needing to help our neighbors for hours, days, weeks? How do we make sure our responders are properly taken care of, make sure they're taking breaks, make sure that they're self-care, doing self-care? How do we not burn out our people? But you also have to train and practice and make sure that your people understand this is not going to be like the drills where you're only doing this for an hour. This is going to be probably a long-term deployment, depending on how severe this disaster is. And I think it's a conversation that needs to happen that we don't often do. How can we practice this? Well, tabletop exercises or drills are great. You can talk through a lot of those things. Who's without having to go out and actually do it. You can do this in a couple of hours and walk through a lot of the steps. Think about it, have thought exercises, discuss things in a low pressure situation. However, you should also then do them outside in community exercises or drills. Actually go and walk the blocks, see what your neighborhood looks like, and think about, where are we going to set up the CERT command post? Where are we going to set up staging? Where are we going to set up medical treatment areas? Where are the closest exits that an ambulance can maybe pull up to and take people to the hospital? When you do these in person, set up that command post. Form and set out damage assessment teams. Those teams are going to report and document incidents. They're going to walk around, find out how bad it is. Remember that? How bad is it? You need to know this, because you don't know where you need to send responders if you don't know where they need to go. You're then going to prioritize and track incidents, because you're going to have a limited number of resources. Those are people. That's equipment, that's gear. And you don't want to waste them. If you send a team to something small, something major might not get the immediate needs it needs. If you send a team from one side of your community to the other and it takes them 30 minutes to walk there, what other incidents could they have done along the way that would have maximized their efficiency? That is a lot of strategy and planning that we do not talk about in the basic CERT training. And this is where doing these exercises and practicing having incidents called in, putting them on a map, prioritizing, look at them. Where is the closest team? How do we maximize our efficiency and prioritize where we can do the greatest good for the greatest number in the shortest amount of time? Send those incident response teams out, reassign them after they're done to new incidents. Practice setting up a medical treatment area. Where that treatment area needs to be, that is going to be incident and disaster dependent. If you have a pre-planned medical treatment area, but you have a mass victim incident somewhere else, you may need to set up an additional treatment area, or you may need to move the primary treatment area closer, because trying to carry a bunch of people who are severely injured several blocks is a waste of resources. It's going to burn your team out. It's going to lead to additional injuries. It's going to lead to people who don't make it. Test your radio communications. Every single drill we've done has had trip ups on the radio communications. Can you confirm that your radios are going to work from one side of the community to the other? Maybe you need, maybe you're going to have a lot of people on the radio on your channel and you need a backup channel, or there's interference. We've had drills where there is just some random interference on a channel and we don't know it until we get a team out there. And then we lose them because they can't communicate back to us. So testing the radio communications ahead of time, understand where there's going to be weaknesses and if there's any unexpected interference is going to be critical to not having these problems when you're actually deploying. And then after the drill, after the exercise, do a hot wash. This is critical. You need to find out where things went wrong because there will be places that things went wrong. And you need to figure out where you need to focus on fixing problems or getting additional training for your people. It's hard to say. This is everything you need to know. It's easier to say, here's some ideas. But because the way CERT operates, because it is so local program, municipality dependent, I want you to start talking, planning, coordinating. Talk to your program managers. If they're resistant or they don't want to do this kind of stuff, take the risk, start planning locally outside of the people who may be the roadblocks. There is a risk, of course, I mentioned it earlier, where teams get cease and desist letters. But when it comes down to it, if they're not going to be there after the earth stops shaking or the tornado lands, they're going to be somewhere else. It's you and your neighbors. We had a CERT captain who liked to say at 2:35 in the morning after the earth stops shaking, it's not going to be us standing there with you. It's going to be you and your neighbors. And we need to start planning that for that eventuality. Hopefully, you have plenty of resources. Hopefully, the fire department shows up. Hopefully, you have all the resources in the world that you need. But CERT wasn't developed for that. CERT was developed for when it's you and your neighbors alone at 2:35 in the morning. What are you going to do about it? So, any questions? Jennifer.
Yeah, hi. My name's Jennifer Jackson Denwald, and CERT, Bellevue, Washington, and I had a question, and it was important. The thing up here, in Vancouver, British Columbia, the CERT groups were taught never to self-deploy, ever.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is what I'm hearing is different. So can you go more into depth about the difference between self-deployment and your neighborhood group coming together?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something I think that is the most misunderstood. There are two reasons for the no self-deploy that gets hammered into us. And that is one, they don't want us freelancing. They don't want us going and interfering with another incident somewhere else on the other side of the city. That's the no self deploy. If it happens in front of you in your own community, this is why we took the training. However, some programs are very strict about this because they teach you for the sake of teaching you. And they want you to feel like you've been empowered and then go sit at home for that phone call that's never going to happen because they don't want you interfering with them. But this is where we have a problem in that if they're not going to show up, and it is us, and you and your neighbors at 2:35 in the morning, and there's no first responders there, you don't have to call it CERT. It's Good Samaritan. Help. Do something. Otherwise, people are going to die or things are going to get worse. And this is where, as I said at the very end, um, take the risk and pre-plan with your neighbors. Um, Hopefully, it's not a bad thing. Some places they really don't want you. They want you sitting at home waiting for that phone call that's never going to happen. And unfortunately, that's a reality of things. So I wish I could give you a better answer than that. But if you and your neighbors decide to start planning, hey, how are we going to help each other out? Don't call it start, call it map your neighborhood. Take the map your neighborhood training. Organize that response at the community level. Um, and no one I think is going to fault you for that. All right, Philip.
Yeah. Hi, Philip Armstrong, Rampart, Rampart Village. And I was in two CERT classes that we had in our community in 2024, but nobody stepped forward to be the team leader. So we didn't really have anything after that, except, these Wednesday trainings once a month. But you mentioned that people might show up thinking, this is like a 2:45 in the morning, thinking this is like a drill, and they're going to be done in 2 hours. And obviously, it won't be for 2 hours. But on the other hand, after 12 hours or something like that, the chances of people, not being functional would go up. And so is there any kind of like rule of thumb of how long people would deploy at a time?
Oh, I mean, that's impossible to answer. Because we don't know how bad it is. That's what you need to figure out. If it's not bad, then it's going to be short. If it is bad, then as long as it takes or until you burn yourself out. Um, and that's where I think there is a disconnect. Um, you train to um, you perform to the level of training that you have, and this is where we encourage people to um, get active because especially when we have older people dominating the number of CERT volunteers that we have, and they have our mobility limited. They can only do so much, and we do not want them to hurt themselves. We have people who will burn themselves at both sides, burn the candle at both ends because they want to help. And that's not good for anyone because then they go down and now they need help. Um, do a longer exercise, maybe do an all day or multiple hours instead of just 2 hours. Um,
Do you mind if I expand on that?
yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so My thinking is, like I have neighbors, and that we would be able to organize at least like a small team. And so there would be a team leader, for the day. And
Mhm.
that team leader, in other words, what is there any rule of thumb for how long they should tell people on the team that they're going to be there? Or, in other words, do we, like stop at some point when, we're starting to have diminishing returns, and then, we're going to reconvene the next day?
So, standard um, operating period for an incident is generally going to be 12 to 24 hours, 12 or 24 hours, depending on how it is. And if things are particularly arduous and they are burning people out, then that operational period might be shorter. Um, but if no help is coming, it kind of is as long as it needs to be. But this is where your team leader needs to keep everybody safe and put safeguards in place to make sure that people are not burning themselves out and becoming a liability. They're not becoming victims. Um, if you're on your own, you're going to do what you have to do. If you have additional people who can step up as team leaders, there are always times when the incident commander or the team leader gets swapped out. There are teams that will have to step aside um, to get water, to get Gatorade, to get food, and I think that that's important to remember that self-care portion of it. And it's the team leader whose job it is to make sure that gets enforced. So you don't want team leaders who are too gung ho and too focused on the mission when they forget the mission is keeping their team safe. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Pierre.
Sorry, I was muted and I was responding to Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
So sorry. Yeah, she can do map your neighborhood on her own. She doesn't need an authority to tell her to do that. Uh, I raised my hand to say just about what you said just now. It's up to the team leader. That's one of the responsibilities of your incident commander, is to take care of the troops and uh, give them rest periods and so forth, and keep a finger on the pulse. And you can't do that if you're swamped. So I know that you've told me that enough times. So one of the things when you were talking about 2:30, 2:35 in the morning, I immediately thought in the rain. And what I'm going to suggest is that people do drills in bad situations at night in the rain and figure out how you deal with that stuff. You learn so much by doing drills that I would encourage them not to do it on a Sunday afternoon in bright sunlight only.
Yeah. The catch is there, though. If you do a drill in the rain, you're going to get less people showing up
Yes, you
because
will.
people don't want to be uncomfortable.
Well,
That's
and
kind of the point of these drills, isn't it, though? To put
but
yourself in a situation that is not comfortable so you learn.
but you don't dump it on them and say, all right, here's the call out at 2:35 on a Wednesday morning,
Mhm.
and it's raining outside. You set it up as a drill. You talk about, the next rainy day, we're gonna do a drill at 2:35 in the morning and figure out how we do this, or pick a season when it's likely to rain, or schedule it. Your drill, and if it does start raining, do not cancel it just because the weather's inclement.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've definitely been guilty of canceling drills because the forecast said it was going to rain, and then it didn't rain. But we've
Yeah,
also
well,
done drills
Southern
in the rain too.
California, we don't do anything when it rains in Southern California. Where in the state of Washington, they would sit at home all the time if they didn't do anything.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Pierre.
Thanks.
Jennifer, go ahead. And I do see your comment that Map Your Neighborhood has been removed from your local program stateside.
What? Yeah, that's the stateside program. It literally, we have a very different program in my jurisdiction because it's a suburb of Seattle and it's very controlled by companies. We have T-Mobile, we have lots of business interests, and the focus of the city is to keep them happy. So it makes it more difficult, but I wanted to address, so I'm not trying to be ageist, but you mentioned people knowing their limits. And I wanted to add that at every single exercise I've been in attendance with this group stateside, which I trained with in 2017. I'm still active in, here. Most of our exercise, we usually have one a year, period. And we do this year, we did do a very, what we call a nasty exercise. It wasn't, I did not name it because it was not nasty enough. It was raining, it was dark, it was windy, but I'm Canadian. So unless, it's several degrees below Celsius, you're not even going to phase us. But here's what's happened at every exercise is that and this most recent one really sticks out because I actually got reprimanded. One of the volunteers was a multi-group, multi-CERT team exercise at night. And most of the people had not met the other people. And we had a lot of new grads. We had people like me who, are Maison Sans Frontières or Team Rubicon, whatever, have advanced degrees, whatever. It doesn't matter. We're all CERT, right? And a gentleman was standing there and he literally lost, he went syncope. He dropped.
Mm-hmm.
And he hit his head. And this was during the initial briefing. And I went straight to him because advanced medical training. And I was asking him questions about orientation, the three, are you oriented times three? Did you hit your head? Do you remember passing out? No, I don't remember. I was just standing and now I'm laying down. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, we're going to go ahead and call paramedics. And I was instantly stopped by by one of the four team leaders from the city here. And I was told that if I did that I would interrupt the entire exercise. It'd be a bother. He was fine. Of course, the gentleman's insisting he's fine. And I'm saying, no, if you can't remember going from vertical to flat, you're not okay. Yeah. You're pretty oriented, but you've got a whopper of a contusion on the back of your head. I really want to pass this up the chain, so it's not on me. And I did. I called for a paramedic for 911 down here, and I was reprimanded. And so I guess, how do you? And it hurt. It hurt ego-wise. It hurt in terms of reputation because I received the reputation. Emergency management is one big gossip pool, and it became she didn't listen. She didn't listen, and it was very hard. I'm over it, but how do you handle that diplomatically? I had to pull look, here's my license card, and I'm not risking it. But I don't know and this was the most recent incident. I actually had during training in 2017, had a gentleman who was, we were doing our drill, or yeah, checking on patients, and the 20-second check, and this gentleman actually had an MI right there on the floor, and there were 3 paramedics in the room who missed it, and I was like, no, dude, that guy's actually diaphoretic. He's actually having something going on cardiovascular, and that one was fine, but this most recent one, really, it's dumb. So how do you encourage your volunteers to be okay with saying, hey, this is my limitation? And it turned out he was on assorted blood pressure medications, and he wasn't hydrated, and other things. But how would you handle that? I mean, would there be a better way than saying, I'm sorry, I have to call 911 because if I walk away from this, it gets worse. It puts my license in jeopardy.
You have a problem, obviously, there. And you mentioned your ego was hurt. You have ego problem at your leadership level, where they need to be in charge. And unfortunately, it's not unique to your team, and it's very problematic. The saying is, people don't quit their jobs; they quit their bosses. Um, there is it's not an easy problem to solve here. You're doing the right thing, and you've taken the training, you have a license, you are keeping your fellow team members safe. This it sounds like there might not be a culture of safety here, and I wish I could give you advice on this. I don't know your leadership. I don't know why they're being resistant. And you do run the risk of being the black sheep because you're the one willing to call people out on it. And I wish more teams operated on a we're doing the greatest good for the greatest number mentality. But a lot of times it is, unfortunately, this is my team, I'm the one in charge, and I don't want you disrupting my plans because someone's dying. I wish I could give you some advice here. And maybe there's people who've got their hands up who can give some advice. So let's see if maybe Julia has some advice here or has a different issue, but I wish I could give you an answer.
I do have some advice, actually. I live in on a mountain in a forest. We have about 2,100 people max here, residents, and our CERT team is very active. I love the idea of getting out in bad weather. We use every incident, every snowstorm, every rainstorm, every earthquake, whatever, to get out there and see what we can do to help. We have a very good relationship with our local fire station, and actually we met with the chief and the deputy chiefs, and they know who we are and what experience and what training we have, and they're very happy to let us get out on our own, so we don't have to worry about being called out. We told them we're going to be out there because this community needs it. They've got 3 to 4 firefighters on every shift. That's it. That's not a lot of help. We don't have any sheriff. We don't have a CHP. We have nothing up here. We have our Property Owners Association, an emergency preparedness committee. And is that me?
No.
Someone else. Okay. And the CERT team, and we have a very sophisticated radio network. We've got ham, GMRS, and CERT radios, and we've integrated all of that into a plan on how to use it. We use every incident to practice. And we're drilling next week. We're having an evacuation drill. We live in a fire area, so we're having an evacuation drill. Yeah, we just use everything. And then I think to Jennifer's first point about worrying about being called out, try to form relationships with your local agencies, the fire, the sheriff, whoever is your supervisor. Let them know what experiences you all have, what kind of members you have. Like we have a lot of military special ops people in our group. We have a ton of nurses. We must have about a dozen nurses in our group, and retired paramedics, retired firefighters. So being able to communicate that to them gave them a lot of confidence in who we are and what our abilities are. So they said, yeah, do what you have to do. So we have their permission to do that. And the firefighters now have CERT radios, so they know that they can reach us on the CERT radio. We have CERT radios, our POA has CERT radios, and that's how we communicate with each other. The CERT members communicate on CERT, the residents communicate on GMRS, and those of us that have ham licenses communicate with ARES and OES, and it works. It's working great.
Thank you, Julia and Patrick. I just wanted to, well, thank you. But yeah, it wasn't really my ego that was hurt. That wasn't what I meant. I meant that it was something that, I did naturally. The guy fell, and I saw the commotion, called a real world, went over, and they were already trying to help him up, and I was like, what happened? And asked all the questions very quickly because I'm licensed as a nurse in BC. And but it became the bigger issue because I was told. I mean, once I realized that he had gone from vertical to horizontal and had no memory of how that happened. Even though he was oriented ×3, and it was just difficult because since then, since that occurred, it's essentially, it's more of a shunning, I guess. It's where yeah, and in this community stateside, not in Vancouver, where I'm on Vancouver Island, and again we're in a very tiny area. It's called Port Alberni, and we happen to have a huge number of retired hockey players in Port Alberni, Canada, and so yeah, when something happens there, it's not even officially a CERT thing. It's everybody comes out and what do we need? What do you need? What can we do? But no, down here it was Jennifer, step back, he's fine. He's saying he's fine. And I said, yeah, it was kind of a slap in the face, and it's still something. This happened in I want to say January of this year, and it's still going on. I mean, I've
Lady, please.
Huh? Sorry?
I just muted that person.
Oh, okay. And I just want to say that, like, developing relationships, yeah, every single firefighter who works down here knows me, because I make a point of, introducing me and introducing whoever is with me. And I'm also, I do supportive activities, but it's a very top-down thing. So I guess, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm saying that the knowing your own limits. I mean, if this gentleman had just taken a second to fill out a form and say, yeah, I have blood pressure issues. But again, he was, I believe, ex-military down here. And his instant response to everything was, I'm fine, I got this. And so other people were taking that as, he's fine, he's got this. And we also had, because it was multiple CERT groups from different places, there was the whole losing face thing. If we called paramedics, they would come from different jurisdictions and we didn't know which one. And, they might shut us down. And it was very complicated. But yeah, I mean, I was fine with being the black sheep because, yeah, the guy needed to be trained. The paramedics got there and then they conferred with me, conferred with him, conferred with a couple people who said, no, he's fine. Jennifer just is overreacting. And they said, well, Jennifer has, the 4-year degree in nursing. So we're going to go ahead and their assessment was the same as mine, which was, loss of consciousness with no memory of how you got there and a big whopper on the back of your head equals a free trip to your local hospital. So
Right.
It wasn't so much my ego,
Mhm.
it just spent in the shine.
But I think that is something that all or a large number of volunteer groups have to deal with and understand is ego. We're all here because we want to help, and a lot of people, this is their full-time job, volunteering, and so ego is always plays a massive part in it, and it is a detriment a lot of times. I've seen coordinators almost throw down and start fighting because they had differences of opinions, and it's something that we need to actively understand and try and mitigate, but it is extremely hard. um, and unfortunately, we can only do the best we can. We can stick to our, I'm not a nurse. If somebody, I maintain my basic EMT, but yeah, unconscious, no memory, hit their head, that immediate, go to the hospital, do not pass go. So it doesn't take uh, other people should have seen that as well, and they should have had your back, and I wish they did. But unfortunately, there are sometimes toxic environments out there, and it's usually leadership that has the problem. Um, Julia, I'm envious of where you are. What community are you in that you have such a great team out there?
Well, I'm in Pine Mountain Club, which is on Fraser Mountain. We just had an earthquake the other day. And yeah, that was fun. And 3:38 in the morning, we were all on the radio, like checking in with each other. And the best thing about the radio situation is that you don't have to actually get out on the street in the very beginning. We check in with people. Is there damage in your area? Is anybody hurt? What's going on? And then you have a better idea where to deploy people.
Mm-hmm.
So I would highly suggest that every CERT team have a radio situation going on.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard.
Yeah.
Carol.
Sorry, yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Okay, so I'm hearing feedback. But are you hearing feedback?
No, I'm not.
Okay, all right. Let me try to lower the volume just in case.
Mhm.
Quick question. I'm in the middle of my CERT training now. For years, I did oil spill response with the UC Davis Oil Wildlife Care Network, and we had to maintain 24-hour hand swapper certification. So I guess this is in the nature of know your limits, just a practical question. We were in full PPE along with the oil spill workers. And course, medical issues are going to happen, but we have people monitoring for us, for our air quality, for potential hazardous situations. Is that something that's available to CERT volunteers in an actual event, or where do we fall in the ICS system?
That is heavily program dependent. How close you work with your agency and how integrated they want you to be. Every program is going to be different on that. And I would say it's probably an exception to the rule.
Yeah.
Roxanne.
Yeah, hi everyone. You know what I've seen in CERT training, across the board is similar to what you said in the beginning. CERT teaches you the basics. I look at it as, like you were saying, responding to an emergency or an incident that's happening within your neighborhood, across the street, your neighbors, so forth and so on. And then, of course, if we did get called out or deployed, of course, that takes it to another level. To add some clarity to the situation of, who's licensed to do this, I see this, and then you have someone who has, is badge heavy and says, no, you're not going to do it, but they don't have the medical training. It's a web, and it's a fine line for those who don't know. But my question is, can you speak to how people, who are responding, let's say as a citizen or a CERT member or a first responder, when they're responding to an incident and let's say as a citizen, how that level of experience is a good guide as to when to relinquish your responsibilities. You have that, once you develop that relationship, just like in CPR, for instance, you should not stop until, someone of equal or higher level responds. I mean, I don't know if that would be helpful for those who maybe were talking over their heads, but it is a fine line as to if you make contact with somebody who's injured, or you see even your neighbor, falls down and hits their head, like Jennifer was speaking to. Someone says, just leave him alone. He's just this or that or whatever. That is a fine line, right? So I don't know, as a CERT member, I'm just talking about as a CERT member who is obviously a citizen, what would be your guidelines, if that makes sense? Do you understand where I'm trying to get?
I'm not entirely sure. I think interpersonal relationships are key. And I mentioned in my previous presentation about faking it till you make it. It's how you are perceived and how people are assessing you. So if you know what you're doing and it is obvious that you know what you're doing, then the professionals are more likely to, and you're doing a good job at it, they will let you keep doing what you're doing so they can be in a better position to take over. If you are clearly not competent and not doing the correct things, they will bump you out real fast because you're making things worse. So it is also, even if you know what you're doing, if you don't seem confident and you don't seem like you know what you're doing, people will assess you that way and they'll perceive you as not knowing what you're doing and bump you out real fast or not pay attention to you. Unfortunately, there's also just those people who it is their ego and they have to be in charge. And if you challenge them, that's unacceptable. So it is such a fine line, but it is interpersonal skills. And unfortunately, let's face it, some guys have egos the size of the room. But I've also seen women with egos the size of the room too. But it does tend to be, unfortunately, guys. And then this woman who they don't know challenges them, and their fragile ego is now in jeopardy, and that's unacceptable. And that is a toxic environment for sure. Is that kind of answering your question?
Am I muted or unmuted?
We can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. That part is good, but going back to Jennifer's situation, they're in a drill. Okay. Let's say that the incident started as a small incident, and then this person goes down. Your CERT commander lives next door, and they do the same situation as in Jennifer's situation, right? She has a license. This guy next to her is just, just blowing smoke. I personally would not relinquish or care about what he's thinking about in that situation. This is just me personally. But then now it turns into a CERT incident. I think that I don't want to. The thing about helping people with CERT and me is that the liability issue, right? I mean, if you're CERT, if you're just a citizen, you fall under the Good Sam Act, right? Or you could, that's heavily relied upon. But when you're CERT, if the city becomes the entity that's liable, then to me it's just, how do I want to say it puts a responder on our level, on a CERT level, as a citizen in a very precarious situation, especially when you're talking about an ICS system as well. When someone above you is telling you no, and you know better. I mean, there's this whole dynamic, right?
Yeah. This is where CERT is. It's basic training. It's not an organization. If you come in with an advanced license, such as an EMT, paramedic, doctor, nurse, your license trumps that CERT level. But you also, if you're willing to risk your license, that's on you, because you know better, and you're taking the risk. Getting into a pissing match with somebody happens, and how well you can assert your authority or decide to defer your authority is up to you. And I can't really speak to that, but we've also heard somebody, is having a heart attack on a plane, and they ask, is there a doctor? And a woman steps up and a man steps up, and they assume that the man is the doctor when he's just a good Samaritan. And she literally has to prove that she's a MD before they'll let her take over. Ego is a massive problem, and unfortunately, this is the world we live in. I wish I had better answers.
No, Patrick, that's a great answer. And I put this in the chat, is that at this time, at the time this occurred, I was fully operating within the boundaries of the Good Samaritan laws. I didn't step outside. And one thing that, I think most BLS classes will teach, and that's CPR AED for healthcare providers, and I encourage everybody to take those, even if you're not a healthcare provider. The biggest thing you learn is to say, and this is true of nursing and school too, and in my physician friends, is I surrender authority. this, I mean, literally the second the paramedics, because there was a pissing match, and I just said, okay, fine. And I called myself. And again, this was an exercise, there was nothing going on. So I used my cell phone, called 911, said, I have a gentleman who has fallen. He has hit his head. And gave the location, had paramedics there. The second they got there, I didn't even tell them what my credentials were. They didn't matter. My credentials at that point did not matter. I just said I surrender authority, and they assessed the guy, took it all from there. It had nothing to do with, I mean, yes, I was protecting my license in the sense that I went to him immediately and did the 3 times, are you oriented? How did you get on the ground? But beyond that, it's pure. I mean, your neighbor falls down, isn't moving, there's blood rolling down the hill. You're going to call 911. And when the paramedics get there, you're going to step back. Or actually, step back or ask the paramedics what they would like you to do. And that's actually what I've done on other occasions. Slip and falls in parking lots with elderly people. And not elderly people, young people, pregnant people. So saying I surrender authority and letting them take over is so important. I mean, it had nothing to do with my credentials. They came back for that later.
Yeah.
So that's all I can add. And I really appreciate you. And now I kind of want to move to California, which makes sense, but Canadians don't blend down there. We really don't. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And it is, safety issues are always supposed to trump everything else. Again, we don't bring a victim to an incident. And that is in every military hierarchy, in incident command. The only one who can override the incident commander is the safety officer. However, we're all safety officers. If it's supposed to work this way, if there's a safety issue, there's a health, life safety issue, we're supposed to be able to stop it and take care of that, and it should be understood. Unfortunately, it's not. This is the world we live in, but we each have to do what the best we can and take more training, become proficient, become competent, and keep pushing forward. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see you back next month. I don't know what the topic is, but thank you, everyone, for the discussion at the end. And we'll see you back in August.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you, everyone else.
Have a good night, everyone.
Great training.